I call to order and welcome you to the Middletown, Ohio regular City Council meeting for Tuesday, January 2nd, 2024. Please join me for a moment of meditation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag. You will hear 3 taps of the gavel when it is time to stand, and 1 to be seated. Please join me in a moment of meditation now.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk of Council, Ms. Gank, please call the attendance roll.
Mr. Farrell? Mrs. Carter?
Here.
Mr. West?
Here.
Mr. Horn?
Here.
Mayor Slamka?
Here. I move to excuse Councilmember Farrell from tonight's meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
It has been properly moved and seconded to excuse Councilmember Farrell from tonight's meeting. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we will proceed to vote. Ms. Gank, please call the roll.
I have one quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
I did not hear who seconded.
Oh,
I did.
Okay, sorry. Mrs. Carter? Here. Mr. West?
Here.
Mr. Horn?
Here.
Mayor Slamka?
here. Oh, I mean, we're supposed to say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. The yeses have it. The motion passes. Councilmember Farrell will be excused from tonight's meeting. Ms. Gank, please present the consent agenda.
For your consideration this evening, we have the approval of the City Council minutes of November 7th, December 12th, and December 19th, 2023. To receive and file the following Board and Commission minutes from the Library Board, November 15th, 2023, the Civil Service Commission from November 16th, 2023, to confirm the personnel appointment of Travis Banks to the position of Utility Billing Supervisor in the Department of Finance, Division of Sewer Administration, confirm the personnel appointments of Owen Stamper, Tyler Gambrell, Evan Smith to the positions of Firefighter, EMT in the Department of Public Safety, Division of Fire, to confirm the appointment of Christopher Jones to the position of Patrol Officer in the Department of Public Safety, Division of Police, and to confirm the termination of Byron McCauley, Communications Manager. To confirm the promotional appointments of Ethan Cox to the position of Fire Apparatus Operator in the Department of Public Safety, Division of Fire, and David Kaiser to the position of Fire Lieutenant in the Department of Public Safety, Division of Fire.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
It has been properly moved and seconded to accept the consent agenda. We will proceed to vote. Ms. Gank, please call the roll.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
Yes.
Mayor Slamka?
Yes.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
The consent agenda is approved. We will now move on to our pinning ceremony. I invite Assistant Fire Chief Ludwig to the podium.
Good evening, Council. First, allow me to congratulate the 4 new members on your selection to Council. Chief Snively wishes he could be here tonight, but unfortunately he had a death in the family, so he is unable to attend. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce you to the newest member of the Department's Officer Corps, David Kaiser. As you're aware, David is being promoted from firefighter to lieutenant. This, in my opinion, is one of the most difficult transitions to make, to go from being a buddy to a boss. However, I'm sure David has fully prepared himself in this transition and will do well in his new role. David grew up in Fairfield Township, graduated from Fairfield High School in 2002, completed the Butler Tech Adult Fire Academy in December of 2006. He has a total of 17 years in the fire service, starting as a part-time firefighter with Fairfield Township. David began his career with the City of Middletown in January of 2017, was promoted to apparatus operator in May of 2022. I had the pleasure of being the training captain when David was hired and led his rookie orientation program. While there were many areas that he struggled a little bit with when he first started, the one thing that he never lacked was a heart for the job. David has always been willing to ask questions, work at something until he got it right, and this is evident by his accomplishments he's had since being hired. Those accomplishments include a fire service program through Eastern Gateway Community College, graduating with an Associate's of Applied Science degree in June of 2022. He also holds certification as a firefighter EMT, fire investigator, hazmat technician, confined space rescue technician, ice rescue technician, as well as an instructor for fire, EMS, and CPR. David resides in the city of Middletown with his wife, Melissa, daughters, Anya, and, did I pronounce that right? Anya, sorry, and Brooklyn, and his mother-in-law, Janet. Family here with him tonight include his father, Daniel, mother, Kathy, mother-in-law, Janet, his wife, Melissa, and his daughter, Brooklyn. David's wife, Melissa, will be doing the badge pinning tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The next order of business is citizen comments, and we have received one comment card this evening. I would like to call, it looks like Barry Move, is that correct? To the, Moore, thank you, Mr. Barry Moore, to the podium.
How are you today, Council?
Do well. Please state your,
Everyone, by the way.
Mr. Moore, please do state your
I
full
got a
name.
big mouth, I'm sorry.
Oh, Mr. Moore, please state your full name.
Okay,
and
first
then-
name is
Oh,
Barry.
one moment, please.
B-A-R-R-Y.
One moment, I'll say the whole thing and then you can do it.
Okay.
So go ahead and please state your full name and Middletown residence or work address for the record, and please address the council as a whole. You will have 4 minutes of uninterrupted speech. Please commence.
Okay. My name is Barry Moore, M-O-O-R-E. I live at 1105 Hughes Street, Middletown, Ohio. And hello, Council. Hello, everyone. I came here today for the second time. If you want to participate, I'd appreciate it. When I come out of Hughes, I face Verity Parkway, coming from the left, coming from Ford and Titus Avenue. When cars come around the corner, there's a really sharp turn there. Trying to get out is very dangerous. Even if I go right to the red light, which is only a couple hundred feet away, if I have to make an abrupt stop because you have to speed up because people speed around the corner, I don't want to get rear-ended and I don't want to pull out and get broadside from the left. I got a SD card. I took a video of the road, how it goes and how cars fly through there. It's made with a drone, so it's easier to see. If you guys had watched, you can't watch it now, but I mean, when you get done, you go back to your offices and watch it and then decide if you could help in some manner by putting up a sign either to the left stating traffic entering highway, or like I stated last time I was here, a mirror over on the hill about yay big around to where I can look at the mirror and see to the left. So it's a little safer for me to pull out because I have two small children, an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old. I would hate to see one of those get injured by me trying to pull out, even though that traffic has the right of way. If I can't see them in time and I pull out and I get broadsided, I would still be deemed my fault because I entered the highway in front of someone. I don't want that to happen either, then I would be facing a fine and other things. So that would be unfair to me. That's really about all I have, besides the SD card, if you guys would be willing to watch it at some point and make a decision or something, that would be very appreciative. I would like that a lot.
All right. Well, thank you. Are you complete?
Yep. Who do I leave the SD card with? You, her, somebody?
If you have it, I'll take it. And let me have your contact information, and then,
I don't have it on the SD card, no, sir.
well, can you give me your contact information? What's the phone number I can get a hold of you?
513-382-4543.
Okay. And then myself or someone from the Police Department of Public Works will contact you.
I gotta find the SD card. I put it somewhere in my pocket. I don't remember where I put it now. I just got off work. I apologize for
That's okay.
for having all this on. I deliver for Amazon and I took off a little early so I could get here. Not in that pocket either. Find my coat pocket. I took my hat off so I wouldn't look so scary. It's kind of cold.
We will wait for Mr. Moore to be complete, and then we will move on.
Okay, thank you.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes our public participation. The next agenda item is council comments. We will begin with Ms. Carter, followed by Mr. West, and then Mr. Horn. I will speak last. Ms. Carter?
Happy New Year to everyone that's in attendance today. I am here. This is my first day and first time on council, so I'm here to listen. I can't make any comments other than I will take a look at that corner that he's talking about. But welcome, and thank you all for attending.
Thank you. Mr. West?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to thank, excuse me, City Manager Lawley and all the staff for welcoming us, bringing us on board. I'd like to thank, obviously, the residents of the City of Middletown for backing me this past year. Other than that, I don't really have much else to say. I know Holiday Hoopla goes until January 13th, so I'd like to urge everybody to go down there. Let's try and show those fine folks some support, and obviously, congrats to Lieutenant Kaiser on his promotion.
Thank you. And Mr. Horn?
First and foremost, Happy New Year. Made it to another year. Looking forward to working with council and working through the challenges that we have and the goals that we have set. I do have a health issue and safety issue, and it's on the topic of coyote management. I actually physically saw a coyote over on the old hospital site. I did report this to the city manager, and I just would like an update from Paul on this.
So we've actually investigated this before through our animal control officer. They obviously, she was not able to locate a den or anything at that time. Since you informed us, and we had one other report last week, Sergeant Nelson and our animal control officer, Jamie Hurley, did go out to the site to look around. They are going to get in contact with the property owner to see what we can do collectively to knock as much of the brush down as possible. So hopefully that will aid in mitigating a coyote issue in that area.
I appreciate that, and the main reason is one, it's it's in the city. There's residential all the way around there. There's usually even a retirement home right there. And when I saw it, I was like, that's a large German Shepherd. And then when he turned around, I saw the tail. I was like, no, that's a coyote. And when I got up to the hill in my van, he was already gone. So that is a health and safety issue. And before it gets warmer, we don't want a pet or a person getting injured from these wild animals. Yield back to the mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Horn? All right, so I have a few comments. First of all, I would like to offer my condolences to Fire Chief Snively and his family on the loss of his mother. We do have some good things happening. It is a new year. Happy New Year to everyone. A big congratulations to all the new council members, new hires, and all the individuals who were promoted today. I want to thank you for your commitment and service to our city. I want to thank the citizens who have put me in this chair and for putting their trust in me. And I take this opportunity to say that I will represent all Middletown residents, communities, and interests. During the campaign, I had the privilege of speaking with residents every day for almost 4 months. I learned much about what matters to you, and I would like to take a brief moment to speak to 2 of those items right now. First, communication. You feel a disconnect between the city and you. Given the changes in the news media, it is our duty to find better ways to communicate with all of you, and I intend to work on this. Second, balance. The residents shared with me, no matter where they lived in Middletown, that they often feel like they have been overlooked, even forgotten. As a city, this is an opportunity for us to work on balanced development and investment in all areas of the city. These are just 2 of the many items I heard throughout my campaign, and 2 of the most fundamental. They are high on my priority list. So I look forward to working with the City Council, the City Administration, and the community to move Middletown toward our collective dream. Thank you. That concludes council comments. The next agenda item is the City Manager's report. City Manager, Mr. Lawley, you have the floor.
We do not have a report this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Lally. The next agenda item is legislation. Legal Representative Mr. Yoder, the legislation, please.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. You have only one item on the agenda tonight. It's ordinance number O-2024-01, an ordinance authorizing a comprehensive compensation agreement with the Middletown City School District. This is a first reading.
And Mr. Lally or Assistant City Manager Mr. Cahall, do you have a presentation or summary?
This evening, Assistant City Manager Nathan Cahill will have a presentation and give some information on our comprehensive compensation agreement that we do with the Middletown City School District. Nathan?
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. Mayor, members of council, before you is legislation proposed that would authorize the city manager to execute a replacement and an amended compensation agreement with the Middletown City School District related to various economic development incentives that the city uses from time to time to promote business growth and relocation to the community. Just to give you a little bit of background, the city and the school district originally entered into a comprehensive compensation agreement back in late 2015. City staff, along with representatives of the school district, have been working behind the scenes to negotiate the proposal that is in front of you tonight. The city school district's board did take action about 3 weeks ago, I believe, to ratify things on their end. But the development or the compensation agreement focuses on 3 property tax based or property tax related incentives that the city can grant for both new and redevelopment. And those are tax increment financing districts or TIFs, community reinvestment areas or CRAs, and enterprise zones, or we'll just keep it easy and call them EZs. And what this agreement does is it continues the regime of having a pre-established negotiated compensation framework for all 3 of these types of incentives during the term of the agreement, so that as the city works with developers and businesses and the like in examining whether or not to grant or ask you folks ultimately to grant these incentives, that the compensation level, make whole provision, whatever you want to call it, to the school district has already been pre-established. So that takes the timing, the notice provisions and the like that we'll get to here in a second, and it also kind of takes the school district having to take time out of its schedule and its agenda to look on everything on a one-off transactional basis, on a case-by-case basis. So I think what's important is we're like, well, why is this really necessary other than, hey, we're just kind of going to agree to a certain compensation level based on these types of incentives ahead of time? What's the issue? So back in 2006 and then subsequently, the state legislature has revised the statutes and the procedure related to all 3 of these incentive offerings. Most notably in 2006, after a lot of lobbying by the State School Board Association, school districts were provided a seat at the table before a municipal corporation or even a township or a county could grant certain property tax related exemptions or abatements, which are what these 3. And the rationale behind that, and you know, to be intellectually honest, school districts are very reliant upon property tax revenue for their operations and capital needs, and they also make up, in comparison to either usually a county, some other taxing jurisdiction, or a city, they make up a sizable majority of the tax duplicate in terms of their overall comparative millage in comparison to other jurisdictions. And so with that in mind, these incentives, before they can be granted by a local jurisdiction, there's established by statute an official notice period to where you put the school district, and in this case the JVS, the Joint Vocational School in the area, on notice that council is intending or contemplating the passage and the issuance of one of these incentives. And that then starts a negotiation period. There is, under the statutes, for these various incentives, there is a statutory default for revenue sharing with the school district if during that negotiation period, the parties don't agree to something else. It's also important to realize that the JVS, in this case, it would either be Butler Tech or the Warren County Career Center, they have what's called a Me Too clause, or what I'll call a Me Too clause. It doesn't say that in the revised code. But they get the same level of compensation in terms of a percentage or other terms and conditions that the local school district agrees to, negotiates, or defaults. So, for instance, if the school district was agreeing to 10 cents on the dollar of their millage, that would be what the JVS. You don't have to negotiate with both bodies. And as you're probably well aware, with CRAs or enterprise zones and like too, there are some income tax revenue sharing triggers that occur under some of these programs if they meet a certain size threshold in terms of new income tax or job generation and the like. And so each time an incentive is proposed to be provided, the statutory process must be followed unless, in this case, what's in front of you is a compensation agreement that waives all notice provision in the future and agrees preemptively to a compensation regime. There's no need to, on a case-by-case basis, having to interact with the school district, which both parties have deemed beneficial. So what's an example? So let's say City Council is desirous of creating a new TIF district somewhere in the city, and you propose legislation, or staff prepares it at your request, or however it happens. And before you can pass that legislation, you would have to provide, the city would have to provide the school district at least 45 days notice before you could take a final vote on any legislation related to that. And that would also open the period of time for negotiation if you wanted anything but in terms of TIFs. There are two statutory defaults that if the parties can't agree to something, or neither party really cares to agree to something different, or they're happy with one of the statutory defaults. One of those in the case of TIFs is that you can exempt up to 75% of the millage for the school district and everybody else, all the other taxing jurisdictions, whether that be the library, the MRDD board, the Adams board, whoever. You can do that up to 75% for up to 10 years. Or you can go for up to 30 years, but the school district's millage is not touched, what would be known as a non-school TIF. So under the statute, those are our two options when we're talking about TIFs, unless something alternative is negotiated. So how does that work? So we're going to keep the math really easy because Nathan has to understand it. So let's say we have a project and its incremental increase in valuation is going to cause a $100 per year increase in property tax revenue. And let's just keep it really easy. We're going to say the schools make up 60% of the tax duplicate. So 60 cents of every dollar that's generated from that project would normally go to the school district for its operations and capital expenditures. So if we looked at the two statutory defaults, City Council could say, okay, well, we're not going to negotiate with the school district, or maybe they're not going to agree to anything. So, well, if we went out for 10 years up to 75%, the school district would get $15 a year in new property tax revenue, and $150 over that 10-year period instead of getting $600 over that 10-year period. And the city would receive $85 per year for a total of $850. Okay, that's one option. As you can see on the screen, the 30-year option generates a little bit more money for the city over that period of time, and would keep the school district whole. So when we as staff are advising and recommending to you folks for your consideration, things like that, we run scenarios as to whether or not to support maybe the infrastructure load, the financing needs of a project or whatnot. We're looking at TIF specifically as to, is there an alternative necessary, or does a statutory default need to play? Now, if we look to, okay, what if we effectuate this agreement and put it into motion here? So under the terms of the proposal tonight, for TIFs in and of themselves, the school district has agreed to a 25% compensation rate for the full 30-year period. which under that scenario, as you can see, would allow the city to generate basically almost double, a little more than double actually, of TIF revenue over that 30-year period, opposed to the non-school option. And that's just one option. We could go through a CRA scenario or an enterprise zone. I think what's important is that on the TIFs, fairly straightforward. On our enterprise zones, we have the option and have exercised this previously, whereas a portion of the abatement that would be reimbursed to the school district is either paid by the property owner that's benefiting as a payment in lieu of taxes, or at times that's been waived historically by the city if it's a sizable enough payroll that's benefiting, especially from an enterprise zone standpoint, that new income tax being generated by that project, assisted by the enterprise zone agreement, far outweighs the, let's say, I won't say de minimis, but the 33% reimbursement to the school is what they would get off the project. So I think what's important here on the revenue sharing standpoint when we're looking at it is that there's no net expenses to the city for these compensation payments. The TIF funds that are handled semi-annually as part of the property tax settlement process. So in one of those scenarios, what can happen is one of two things occurs. It depends on the county that you're dealing with and which auditor's office you're dealing with, because everyone has their own style. A project that may generate $100 in the school district under this scenario would be entitled to, say, $15 of that $100. Sometimes the city will just get 85 and the school directly gets 15 as part of the settlement. Sometimes the auditor's office will say, here's the full 100, city. You cut a check for the 15%, and we have those in all those provisions. Our CRAs and enterprise zone compensations are handled by individual agreements. So when we enter into a CRA abatement or an enterprise zone, we have individual agreements for those projects that specify. Let's take enterprise zones for instance. They'll specify on whatever schedule's negotiated. Here's your payroll growth and the payroll that you have to hit. Here's your level of investment. If you hit these markers, then X percentage is exempted from your property taxes. Here's what is a in lieu payment to the school district to make them whole, or is there an offset if you have a sizable enough payroll that would be offset by the income tax generation far and away in comparison to the property tax foregone by the school district. I think in totality, this type of agreement, I think, shows a partnership between the city and our school district. The school district has a vested interest in promoting economic growth for our overlapping jurisdictions because it helps grow their tax base so that future millage increases that they may request of the electorate do not have to be as large because there's a larger base to tax. And typically these projects historically do not generate a large influx of new enrollment to the district, which can be an operational concern for them. And they actually, in comparison to the 2015 agreement, as you may have seen, they've actually provided a little bit more lax restrictions on allowing for residential components that benefit from some of these types of incentives that allow us to do more of a mix of uses for larger projects. There's also one miscellaneous provision in this agreement, and frankly, it's something that the city did not complete since 2015 and it agreed to do. So it's still in there, and we'll get some legislation, assuming you pass this tonight, we'll get that taken care of. And we had a handful of what I'll call pre-2006 TIFs that fell under the previous state law regulations in terms of no need for compensation or anything else. The school district back in 15 and again today are perfectly fine with the city exercising its home rule authority to have a TIF over those areas in the future if it wants to, but would want those to fall under this compensation agreement. Those TIF districts are what I would call dormant There has not been any development of any scale, if any, since 2005, and their revenue generation is either zero or very de minimis, and there's no ongoing expenses or debt service tied to any revenue generated for those sites. And I think it shows a commitment to follow through on something that should have been followed through on 8 years ago. So I know I spoke ad nauseum, and I apologize for that, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions as you think this over. Yes, I'm about to point out, the city manager remind me, this is just a first reading. Obviously, this will potentially be back on the agenda for next time.
Thank you so much. Is there any discussion, any questions for Mr. Cahall? Anybody right now?
So you have two different timelines here. How often do you go into a 30-year TIF?
Typically, you're going to go into a 30-year TIF more often than not.
Okay.
You look at it, if you're doing the economic development practitioner viewpoint on things, you're looking at, okay, what's the need in the pro forma, what's the need in the project, and what level of revenue needs to be generated to widen that road or extend those water and sewer lines or whatever the case might be. And there are times when, a shorter time period usually can work. What I've seen throughout the years is that a 1075 default regime is really only makes sense if you have a very, very large end user type project that's going to be online, day one. It's not a multi-site project where it has multiple buildings and different end users, but you have just one big mega user. To the extreme, let's say the Intel site in New Albany, outside of Columbus. That'd be one where in 10 years at 75%, you're probably going to generate as much, if not more, than you would a multi-site project over 30 years.
Any other questions? Nope. I do have a couple of them. So when you speak to the 33% reimbursement, who pays this?
So that we have an option under our agreements. We can require the property owner or the beneficiary of that enterprise zone agreement or the CRA agreement to pay that as a payment in lieu of taxes. Or there are times where city council may decide that, we have X employer coming in and the income tax, the new income tax generated in comparison to that reimbursement level is so disproportionate that, the city may be willing to pay that out of that income tax revenue.
So, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. The city would be paying that out of the income tax revenue?
Yeah, generated by that site, yeah.
Okay, so that would be just an amount that city resident taxes would pay for ultimately?
I mean, you can look at it that way. You can look at it as a portion of the new income tax generated from that business. You may see that in a scenario where, let's say you have an existing facility that all that new business is coming in is they're maybe going to add on, 10,000 square feet to a 200,000 square feet facility already. The increase in valuations fairly de minimis between what exists now and what will in the future. But if they're, they may have, 300 or 400 jobs that have a large payroll that you're like, hey, it's worth it for the city.
So that's what it sounds like. It sounds like we look at these and say, what is the trade-off? What
Yes,
are we
ma'am.
gaining? Is this worth it to our residents?
That's correct.
Yes, okay, that makes sense. And that, like you mentioned before, it's in partnership. Also, now I did read something about EVs. I presented that question, so I'll just read it. It says, the question I had was, given that the Ohio Department of Development cautions against using EVs and says they should only be used as a last resort, what are the risks to the city of EVs and what precautions are in place to protect the city? Basically, why is there a caution from the state?
So there have been over the years, and I think some folks have been a little bit wiser. And what you'll also see is there was a lot of property tax related incentive changes by the legislature back in the early 2000s. But there have been some other changes subsequently. One of the biggest things with enterprise zones, and frankly, in a previous employment with another city in the region, I ran into this personally. In that you would have businesses that, they were creating a moral hazard in the marketplace. They would get an EZ agreement, move to jurisdiction X, stay there until their enterprise zone agreement expires, and then move 2 suburbs down the highway and just keep doing that. And so you have provisions now, for instance, that the city can't offer an enterprise zone agreement to somebody who's already on one somewhere else in Ohio, or they have been, even if they're not on one, but they were previously so many years ago. So, but what we also have is that sometimes these enterprise zones agreements are used as a cost savings to allow these companies to maybe invest into a property or buy machinery and equipment, which has been something over the years some jurisdictions have been burnt on. What's always wise, and what I would always recommend, our staff would always recommend to you folks, would be to have some clawback provisions in those enterprise zone agreements. So if you, for instance, leave town, not just during your period, but within 5 years after the expiration of X, Y, or Z, there are some clawback provisions. There's repayment of, property taxes exempted. There's repayment of there's some penalties involved. And we do that, I think to really, to show that, look, we're serious, as a city, we're serious about and serious about assisting and helping, but we, it's a two-way street, and that we want everyone to have a commitment to staying here.
Thank you. And going back to the 2015 original agreement.
Yes, ma'am.
And you had mentioned that we did not complete some items. What was the reason? What were the things? What did we not complete, and why?
So we were asked under that agreement, or required under that agreement, to extinguish, I believe there were 4 TIFs. There's the Aronka site TIF, there's a riverfront TIF. I'm going off memory here, Mayor, forgive me. There were two other TIFs, I believe. I think there was 4 in total that were passed by the city in 2005. And like I said, they're dormant. There have not been any exemptions of any. There's one where there's been one exemption filed on, but it's pretty much, I believe, expired by now. But those are ones where prior to 2006, a city could go out and TIF things or do even CRAs, or to a certain extent, pretty much unilaterally with no compensation agreement. And to a certain extent, maybe folks were okay with that back in the day, except that also new residential construction was also included under the TIF statute. So there were issues, especially in a lot of suburban areas where communities may be providing TIFs to, 500 home housing subdivision, adding obviously more school enrollment to the district, but they're not getting any revenue for the next 30 years from those households. So that's one example.
You had mentioned the dormant TIFs.
Yes.
You'd also mentioned in the financial impact section of the staff report, eliminating, and I believe are you talking about the 6 that were in that section, the Aronka, the Riverfront?
Yeah, and actually, you know what, now that I think about it, they're here. Yes, the Green Tree, the South Yankee Suncoke, yeah.
All of those?
Yeah.
So what is the purpose of, because you mentioned eliminating them and then possibly reintroducing them in the future, if there's no expense attributable to them, why would we be extinguishing and then reintroducing?
So we've been required under the previous agreement and under this current proposal to extinguish those. Those handful of TIFs predate the original 2015 agreement, and so they fell outside of the compensation agreement from 2015. The school district's desire was to have all TIFs, all CRAs, everything fall under one umbrella agreement. And at that point in time, I'm just speculating, I wasn't here at the time, but those were not what people would say were active TIFs. They were TIFs on paper, but had not had any exemptions filed for any parcels within them.
And could you just clarify what, you'd mentioned legacy TIFs? Is that, what, could you explain and clarify what that means, legacy in this instance?
So legacy, and I'm sorry, Mayor, where are you? I'm sorry.
That's the same section, the financial impact section of the staff report.
Oh, okay. That it just said another way. I was trying to use a fancy word, I
Okay,
guess, in the
gotcha.
staff
Thank
report.
you. Thank you for clarifying.
Yes.
I appreciate that. Okay, and I think all my questions for tonight are complete. Let me just take a quick look here. All right, is there any further discussion on the legislation? No, I hear none. Okay, as this is the first reading, as we said, there is no action to be taken at this time. The next item on the agenda is new business. Do any council members have any new business?
I have one thing, Mayor.
Excellent.
I know we're supposed to slide into executive session next for boards and commissions. I'd like to propose that we wait for Councilman Farrell to return before we divvy out boards and commissions.
Okay, Mr. West has suggested that we wait for Councilperson Farrell to come back before we do boards and commissions. Do I hear a motion? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, it's properly been moved and seconded to wait until Councilperson Farrell comes back from, and to join us again for the next meeting before doing boards and commission. Is there any, actually, we will just go ahead and take a vote. Ms. Skank, would you please call the roll?
Yes.
Mayor Slanka?
Yes.
Mrs. Carter?
Yes.
Mr. West?
Yes.
Okay, the yeses have it. The motion passes. We will go ahead and wait until Councilperson Farrell comes back to do boards and commission. Is there any other new business? No. Okay, I have some. I have 4 items that I would like to look at tonight. 2 are just simple announcements. And let's see, 1 is a request for discussion at our next regular meeting. First of all, I'd like to announce a City Council work session on aquatics in Middletown scheduled for Tuesday, January 9th, 2024 at 6 p.m. here in Council Chambers at 1 Donham Plaza to discuss aquatics in Middletown. If you have ever been interested in a water or pool type feature in Middletown, please attend this meeting and spread the word. Again, that work session will take place on January 9th at 6 p.m. here in Council Chambers. Number 2, I announced the City Council work session for City Council's annual strategic planning meeting for Saturday, January 20th, 2024 at 8 a.m. at Central Connections located at 3907 Central Avenue. I would like to remind the public that all work sessions are open to the public and will be posted on the city website. Again, that work session will take place on January 20th at 8 a.m. at Central Connections. Next, I would like to discuss updating the public comments guidelines for City Council work sessions. As this is a council practice and not a legislative action or policy issue, we are able to discuss this immediately during new business and reach a consensus for council practice moving forward. It is stated in Middletown's guidelines for citizen comments, quote, Middletown City Council has maintained the solicitation of citizen input as part of its council meetings for some time. Whether during the council work session, public hearing, or related to legislation, public input is gathered, unquote. The guidelines further state that comment cards will be collected before the start of the meeting, that each resident will have a total of up to 4 minutes to comment, and that comments will last a total of up to 1 hour complete. I would like to propose changes to the current guidelines for work sessions in order to give more structure to the practices and streamline the process. So again, this would be just for work sessions, not for City Council regular meetings, the changes that I'm proposing. I am for this update as I believe the public should have some time to express their views on topics we discuss during work sessions in real time, as council's decisions will affect their lives. This matches my campaign idea that all people who want a place at the table should have it. This supports the governmental structure that City Council members are elected by and work for the people. This also supports the First Amendment of the United States of the Constitution, for which we are responsible, which provides protection to and opportunity for free speech in public forums. The public meeting of a council is considered a limited public forum, and that means council may regulate the time, place, and manner of speech. We do this through the adoption of rules of procedure and conduct, and I support appropriate time limits. The people would have the opportunity to communicate with council in real time during public meetings, and I have some suggestions as to time limits for work sessions. I suggest we limit each comment to 2 minutes. This will help ensure focus and efficiency. Number 2, I suggest that each resident interested in commenting fill out comment cards throughout the duration of the work session, and that the public comment segment is built into the end of the work session meeting. Number 3, I suggest limits for total time as follows. Because work sessions are timed, they're not open-ended. For 1-hour work sessions, a public comment limit of 15 minutes. For 2-hour work sessions, a limit of 30 minutes. And for work sessions of 3 hours or more, a limit of 1 hour. Again, I suggest building the public comment section into the end of the meeting. In cases of a strong showing of public interest, council may extend the public comments by majority consensus. In case of a weak public showing in which the public comment segment ends before the allotted amount of time, council may either use this time for further discussion or simply end the meeting. These are my suggestions. Is there any discussion? Okay. Oh, yes, sir.
For me personally, I think, sorry, I was thinking about everything you were saying. So for me personally, I can see where there are instances where work sessions are work sessions, not necessarily almost like a special meeting where we allow comments. I mean, Manager Lawley, in your opinion, like, for example, January 20th, if we were going to have comments, you'd almost call a special meeting in that circumstance, wouldn't you?
Generally, at the strategic planning session, we have several items to cover. We could have as many as 8 to 10 items that we cover in the strategic planning session. So citizens' comment could extend that meeting a lot longer than it is. It's a possibility. Is it a probability? I don't know. It's like the council meeting. Sometimes you get 15 people sign up. Some you get 1, like tonight. So it could be heavier than normal because it is a work session with relatively important matters out there. But then on the same token, maybe that is why we allow for comments. But generally at the work sessions, we don't do a lot of, there's not a lot of votes unless a council member would make a motion. So there could be time between that meeting and the next council meeting for citizens to comment.
Anybody? Mr. Horn?
And when we're doing a work session, that is for the development of eventually turning into an ordinance, I believe. Like with the Aquatic Center, we're going to have a work session and we're going to have a conversation with both options from what I'm understanding. So then we have to have 2 readings before it becomes whatever it's going to become. That gives the citizens the opportunity to make their comments there. I'm not opposed to hearing their thoughts, but that's what the council meetings are for. The work sessions are for work, and then we can take it from there. That's just my thought on the matter. After I thought about what you just said, I was trying to take it all in because you do work very hard on your comments. So that's just my feeling is a work session is for them to, they get the opportunity to sit in and see what we're working on, and then they can actually formulate a comment on the first and second reading before the decision's made.
Thank you.
Yield back.
Ms. Carter, do you have any comments or discussion?
No.
Okay. And I appreciate that very much because you do bring up good points. Work sessions do often cover that. And just with some legal authority, I read that the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution provides protection to an opportunity for free speech in public forums. Right. The public meeting of a board or council is considered a limited public forum, which means, like I said, the government can regulate the time, place, and manner of speech. Boards and councils regulate speech through the adoption of rules of procedure and conduct. So I'm looking to actually make some of those rules to streamline the process so that we are still upholding the Constitution and giving the members of the residents a say. I also do think, in general, it's also nice, again, some may come, some may not, but with those time limits, for example, 15 minutes, that could possibly be seven comments, but it'll streamline, it'll give us that instantaneous, in-public, immediate feedback, which they could actually say, they might bring up some good ideas that we might want to consider. Yes, Mr. Horn.
Law Director, do we have a constitutional problem?
No, and I was wanting to ask a point of clarification on that as well. Just to be clear, you don't have to, not that I'm recommending that, but there is no constitutional mandate that you allow for public comment at public meetings. The limited public forum provision basically says that if you create a public forum allowing people to speak, you have to treat everyone equally, which is when you set the rules, and you can't discriminate based off viewpoint or other things like that. So you don't have to, at all meetings, provide for public comment. If you want to, you're certainly allowed to do that. Does that answer your specific question, Councilmember Horn? The point of clarification I wanted to ask, and happy to draft up whatever you all ultimately agree to, is under Ohio law, there's really not a provision dealing with what you're calling work sessions. There's really those three types of meetings. There's regular meetings, there's special meetings, and there's emergency meetings. At regular meetings, you all can discuss whatever you want. Those are the meetings that at the beginning of the year, we say, hey, we're meeting the first and third Tuesday of each month. Be there, be square. You'll know we'll be there. If you want to hear whatever might come up, we'll talk about it then. So you can talk about whatever you want. But for special meetings and emergency meetings, the public notice that you send out in advance has to specifically state what you're going to be talking about. And then you're limited to only being able to talk about those things. But there's no provision that says you must state how long the meeting will go or anything like that. Obviously, we can guesstimate how long meetings will go, and if you'd like, have parameters set up around that. But there's really not a provision, and I was just pulled it up as well, is your charter doesn't use the word work session. Some people think of that as either, for instance, Deerfield Township, for whom I'm also the law director, their first meeting of the month, they call their regular meeting. Their second meeting of the month is technically a regular meeting, but they call it a work session. That evokes the concept of, hey, it's going to be a little bit more, dialogue. We're going to be working on thinking about those types of things. They're really regular meetings. They call them work sessions, though, just to let the general public know what's going to be going on. So, Mayor Slamkar, are you proposing along the lines of special public comment rules or specific public comment rules to special meetings? Or would it be, hey, at the first meeting of the month, we'll have the normal, and then at the second meeting, you want those to be limited? Whatever you want, I'm great with. I just trying to get at the same vernacular.
Absolutely, clarification, certainly. It was my understanding that work sessions were special meetings, is that correct?
Correct. Work sessions is a lay term. It's not a legal term, but yes, I would certainly think special sessions where you say, hey, we're going to meet on this specific date differently than when we normally do. It's fair to call that in lay terms a work session, yeah.
Right. And one of the reasons I wanted some clarification is because the charter doesn't really have a policy. So I kind of wanted to create some more guidelines. We have our guidelines for our regular meetings. And I do think it'd be beneficial for council to hear in real time. And again, it's at the end of the meeting. Therefore, it would be something that we could hear and take into account, but we get the business done at the beginning. And I know that we had mentioned this work session coming up on January 20th. I know we are starting an hour earlier, and I was told it probably wouldn't even take the time even with the hour later. So I'm thinking it might be a possibility, and again, we probably won't often get a lot of people coming, but we might, and then they would have that option to speak for 2 minutes, which encourages precision and focus, so they would know what they want to say it, and it's done. It's an idea. I'm for it.
So legally speaking, I would say you'd be proposing public comment rules for special meetings. Those are the ones that aren't the first and third. For everything else,
Correct. Not
yeah,
the
that's
regular
what.
meetings.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
wanted to-
we could do that.
Thank you.
Yep.
I like the guidelines for regular meetings. I think they work well. Is there any further discussion? All right, are there any thoughts? Does it sound like something we might consider to do? Go ahead and have the 2 minutes, or what are your thoughts? Do you want to go ahead and do it? Go ahead and wait, talk about it in a work session? We have different options. Yes, Mr. Horn?
I motion to table it till Councilman Panel is back.
All right, so there's been a motion to table the discussion on allowing public comments during work sessions. Is there a second?
Second.
It has been properly moved and seconded. Would you please call the roll, Ms. Gank?
Mayor Slanka?
Yes.
Ms. Carter? Yes. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
Yes.
All right, motion passes. We will go ahead and table this until the next meeting. Thank you. I had one more item that I wanted to bring up in new business, which was in today's consent agenda. I noticed an internal promotion, and I would like to understand this practice more. So I'm requesting at the next regular meeting on January 16th that city staff be prepared to just present on our internal promotion hiring practices for non-civil service employees. And this, I guess, perhaps might go in the city manager's report.
We could do that.
We could do that?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Mr. Lally. Okay, and that's it for me for new business. Is there any further new business? Okay. Hearing none, the next item on the agenda is executive session. And there is a request to move into executive session under the authority of ORC 121.22G. 1, to consider the appointment of a public official, and under the authority of ORC 121.22G. 2, to consider the purchase of property for public purposes or for the sale of property at competitive bidding if premature disclosure of information would give an unfair, competitive, or bargaining advantage. Do we have a motion to move to executive session?
Motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
It has been properly moved and seconded to move to executive session. We will proceed to vote. Ms. Gank, please call the roll.
Sorry to interrupt right
Yes.
now. I believe, unless there's anything else to be discussed on appointment of public officials, there was a motion earlier to table the executive session discussions on that. Are there other?
There was a motion, I believe, to defer the boards and commissions. So yes, there's something else to discuss.
Dealing with public officials, or only
part
relating
two.
to purchase of property?
Purchase of-
Then I would recommend that you amend the motion to basically delete out from where it says ORC 121.22G1 to consider, because we're not going to be doing that part anymore. And instead it'll just, and I can read it all back to you, and you can, if you so prefer, could just say so moved. But we'll just use the second part, that's the ORC 121.22G2, dealing with property. So the motion would be to go into executive session under the authority of ORC 121.22G2 to consider the purchase of property for public purposes or for the sale of property at competitive bidding if premature disclosure of information would give an unfair competitive or bargaining advantage. Sorry to be a pain there.
No, that was perfect. Thank you so much. So that has been moved, and do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. It has been properly moved and seconded. We'll proceed to vote. Ms. Gank, please call the roll.
Mrs. Carter? Yes. Mr. West?
Yes.
Mr. Horn?
Yes.
Mayor Slanka?
Yes. The yeses have it, and the motion passes. Council will now move to executive session. We'll be returning to open session to vote on board and commission appointments.
And I think although I know we're moved into executive session, I think you're putting the,
Forgive me.
correct. So.
Thank you. We will return to open
So it won't be
session.
for consideration of board appointments.
No.
Perhaps it's polite to know whether any action is anticipated to follow afterwards, so that people know whether to stick around or not.
Correct. No, forgive me. I'm so sorry. Yes. So we will return to adjourn.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.